They rubbed white clay across her forehead, tied cowrie shells around her wrists, and led her barefoot toward the hill of dust, as if they were escorting a bride. But everyone in the village of Ndalu knew they were really escorting a poor girl to her death. And the cruelest part was not the drums or the chanting, or the way the women refused to meet her eyes. It was the silence. Because silence is how a village teaches the weak that nobody is coming for them. And Abeni had known that silence since she was 9 years old. Since the fever took her father, and the fire took her mother, and left her in the back room of her uncle's compound, where she learned how to live on scraps, on chores, on other people's leftovers, on patience, on dignity, and on the dangerous hope that if she stayed kind enough, useful enough, invisible enough, life might one day spare her. But life had not spared her. And now, at 19, dressed in a white wrapper that made her look more sacred than human, she was being offered to the ancestors, because the wells had gone bitter, the children had been falling sick, the crops had been drying at the roots, and fear had found the easiest body to place its hands upon. If you stay with this story until the end, you will understand why the people of Ndalu never again allowed fear to choose the innocent. Because what happened on that hill did not only save one girl, it broke a chief, exposed a family, and changed a village forever. Abeni had never been the loud kind of girl, never the kind who filled a room with herself. But people noticed her in spite of themselves, the way people notice a lamp in a place used to darkness, because she carried suffering with an almost frightening calm. And there was something about the way she moved through hunger, insult, and exhaustion that made decent people feel ashamed and wicked people feel irritated. She rose before dawn, fetched water before the line grew long, patched baskets for market women, mended fishing nets for widowers who always promised to pay later, and still somehow found time to help old Mama Shad pound millet in the evenings without being asked. And when others complained, Abeni would only smile softly and say the words her mother had once told her. A person who has no roof must learn how to stand beneath rain without becoming the storm. And perhaps that was why Kato, the chief's only son, had never been able to look at her the way the other young men did, casually, lazily, like she was just another village girl passing through dust. Kato had watched her for years, with the uneasy respect a man feels when he realizes the bravest person he knows is someone the world has decided does not matter. And once, when he was 16, he had seen Abeni split her only roasted yam in half to feed a child who was not her brother, not her cousin, not even from her compound. And he had walked home that day with the strange, uncomfortable knowledge that character is often poorest where money is richest, and richest where comfort has never lived. His father, Chief Jabari, ruled Ndalu from a high-walled compound near the Acacia Ridge, a man with a deep voice, heavy rings, careful smiles, and the kind of authority people obeyed before he even spoke. He settled disputes, blessed harvests, named newborns, and led the elders through every season of flood and drought. And because power is easiest to wear when others mistake it for wisdom, the village had long stopped asking where his decisions truly came from. But Cato knew his father better than most men know the stranger in their own mirror, knew the pauses before his lies, the softness he used when he wanted obedience to feel like love, and the stillness in his eyes whenever he had already chosen ambition over mercy. For 3 months, Ndalu had been sick with thirst in a way that made no sense, because the great spring above the eastern rocks had never failed in living memory. Yet the water reaching the lower wells had turned metallic and sour. Children developed rashes. Women whispered that the ancestors were angry. And the elders, led by old Mbeku, whose spine had bent, but whose appetite for influence had not, gathered every evening beneath the baobab to search for a reason that would not require them to question the powerful. And that is the thing about frightened communities. They do not always choose the truth. They choose the story that hurts the weakest person most efficiently. It was Mbeku who first spoke Abeni's name in council, and he did it gently, which is how dangerous men often begin. "The ancestors demand cleansing," he said, stroking the beads on his wrist as if consulting holiness itself. "The impurity entered through a broken household. A child without father or mother walks under no shield. The land has eyes. The land remembers." No one asked how land remembers only the poor and never the greedy. No one asked why the ancestors would punish thirsty children for the grief of an orphan. No one asked why every solution in Ndalu seemed to require the suffering of someone who could not fight back. Chief Jabari did not propose Abeni, but he did not stop the proposal either. And in villages, as in kingdoms, silence from the highest seat is permission wearing a dignified face. Cato heard of the decision before sunset and went first not to the council house, but to his father's chamber, where the chief sat drinking spiced tea as if the world had not just narrowed itself around a girl who owned almost nothing but her life. "Tell me it is not true," Cato said, and the chief did not answer quickly enough. "The elders have chosen," Jabari said at last. "The village is afraid. Sometimes fear must be guided before it devours everyone." Cato stepped closer. "So you feed it Abeni?" Jabari's eyes hardened, though his tone remained smooth. "Do not make the mistake of confusing sentiment with leadership. A village in panic needs certainty. If the ritual calms them, then the ritual serves peace." "Peace," Cato said, "or convenience?" But the chief only lifted his cup again, which was answer enough. For the first time in his life, Cato walked out of his father's room not angry, not shocked, but cold. Because cold is what enters a person when love for family collides head first with the truth. That night, while drums from the shrine compound rolled across the dark, Mama Shad came to find him. She was a widow older than the oldest song in the village, blind in one eye, bent in the shoulders, and famous for remembering what powerful men prayed would be forgotten. She sat on his veranda without greeting and said, "They are not killing that girl because the ancestors want her. They are killing her because the dead left her a road back to the truth." Cato stared at her. "What truth?" Mama Shad leaned closer, her one clear eye shining in the lantern light. "Abeni's mother, Nia, kept records for the grain house before she died. Quiet woman, sharp mind, sharper than most men liked. A month before the fire, she told me she had found numbers that did not match, roots that changed on paper but not on the land, and a gate built where no gate should be built. She said if anything happened to her, the truth would wait inside the baobab with 3 knife marks." Cato felt the air change. Why say nothing until now? Mama Shad's laugh was small and bitter. "Because old women survive by knowing when a village is ready to hear what it once refused to see. Tonight it is ready, or it will lose another innocent child." Cato did not sleep. He took a lantern, a digging knife, and his horse, rode beyond the silent compounds to the old baobab near the abandoned threshing yard, and there in the bark, almost swallowed by time, he found them. 3 slanting knife marks, faint but real. Inside the hollow trunk, wrapped in oilcloth and ash, lay a leather ledger, a carved brass seal, and a rusted iron key heavy enough to mean something. The ledger was Nia's hand, neat and disciplined even after years of dust. And as Kato turned the pages beneath lantern light, the truth rose around him piece by piece, like something buried but never dead. Water allocations altered without council approval. Laborers paid to dig a private channel from the eastern spring. Sacks of treatment herbs charged to the village, but never delivered. And entries signed with marks connected not only to Elder Mbeku, but to Chief Jabari himself. Kato read until his stomach turned. The sweet, clean spring that had served Ndalu for generations had been diverted uphill months earlier to irrigate Jabari's hidden sugar fields beyond the ridge, a venture no one in the village officially knew existed, while the people below were left to drink from a lower basin contaminated by mineral runoff and rotting brush. The sickness in Ndalu was not a curse. It was theft. Not only theft of water, but theft of explanation. Because once people started asking why the wells had gone bad, someone needed to give fear a face. And what face is safer for the powerful to sacrifice than that of a poor orphan girl, with no father to shout and no mother to accuse? Kato sat there for a long time with the ledger in his lap, hearing not the crickets or the wind, but the collapse of the world he had inherited. Because blood becomes a burden the moment you realize it has carried injustice into your hands. At dawn, he rode to the ridge above the eastern spring, following the notations in the ledger. And there, hidden behind woven thorn fencing and brush meant to look natural, he found the stone sluice gate. It was real. The iron key fit. And when he forced the mechanism open just enough to hear water surge against blocked rock, he knew no denial on earth could hold back what he now carried. He returned to the compound and confronted his father one last time, laying the ledger, the seal, and the key on the low table between them. Chief Jabari did not pretend ignorance this time. He looked at the pages, closed his eyes once, then opened them with the weary irritation of a man annoyed not by guilt, but by exposure. "You do not understand governance," he said. "The sugar field would have made Ndalu rich in 2 seasons. Kato's voice shook. "After how many children got sick? After how many women buried infants because their water burned them from the inside?" Jabari stood slowly. "A chief makes difficult calculations. History remembers success, not discomfort." Kato nearly laughed, but grief stopped it on the way out. "And Abeni? Was she part of the calculation too?" Jabari's silence lasted only a second, but that second told the whole story. "Her mother kept records," he said. "Curious women raise dangerous daughters. Once the council chose her, I let the current move." Kato stepped back as if struck. There are moments when a son stops seeing a father and starts seeing only a man. And that morning in the chief's chamber was one of them. "Then I will stand against you," Kato said. Jabari's reply came soft, almost pitying. "Then you will stand against your own blood. And blood has a price." "So does water," Kato said, gathering the ledger. "So does silence." By first light, the village had gathered at the base of the Hill of Dust, where generations had once held planting prayers, but where no human offering had ever truly been made, not in living memory, not in the old songs, not in anything except the convenient inventions of frightened men. Still, rituals do not need truth to feel powerful. They need performance. The drummers beat slowly. Women scattered millet. Mbeku lifted his staff and called on ancestors he had learned to use the way traders use weights, adjusting holiness to suit profit. Abeni walked between two shrine women without resistance, and the calm on her face was so deep it shamed the crowd. She was afraid, yes, but there is a form of courage beyond screaming, and it lives in the body that refuses to beg from people who have already betrayed it. When she reached the flat stone at the top of the hill, Mbeku raised both hands to begin the final invocation, and that was when the crowd below parted at the sound of hooves striking dry earth. Cato rode through them like a man pursued, not by soldiers, but by truth too large to carry slowly. He did not stop at the edge of the ritual ground. He rode straight up the hill, swung down, and placed himself between Abeni and the elders before anyone had time to remember what rank he held. "This ceremony ends now," he said. Mbeku's mouth tightened. "Careful, son of Jabari. You stand on sacred ground." "No," Cato said, lifting the leather ledger high enough for the nearest rows to see. "I stand on stolen ground, above stolen water, in front of stolen holiness." A murmur moved through the crowd. Chief Jabari, who had arrived later than the elders so that authority would appear to descend rather than accompany, stepped forward with the heavy dignity of a man still hoping control could be recovered by posture alone. "Cato," he said, "do not shame this family." Cato turned and looked at him fully, not as son to father, but as witness to accused. "The family was shamed the moment you chose her life to hide your theft." That sentence struck the morning like lightning without rain. Abeni's eyes lifted to Cato's face, not with hope yet, but with the stunned stillness of someone hearing a locked door open somewhere far away. Mbeku barked first. "Lies! The boy has been bewitched by pity." But pity was too small a word for what followed. Cato opened the ledger and began to read. He read dates, water counts, labor payments, herb deliveries, field coordinates, names, signatures, amounts, and every practical detail by which corruption foolishly believes it can become invisible. He held up the brass seal used on the false orders. He showed the iron key. He called forward two men who had once worked at night on the ridge and had long been told they were building a reserve channel for drought, not a private diversion. Under the eyes of the whole village, they confessed what they had seen. Then Mama Shade climbed the hill herself, slow but unshaking, and told them what Nia had said before the fire, how she feared the records would one day cost her life. Jabari tried to command silence. Mbeku tried to call the ledger forged, but truth had already moved into the bodies of the crowd, and once ordinary people feel it settling inside them, authority begins to sound like panic. "If I lie," Cato said, voice carrying across the hill, "then come with me now. Let the village follow. Let the gate above the eastern spring answer for itself." And because no lie invites witnesses to its proof, that was the moment Chief Jabari lost them. The entire crowd moved, elders, mothers, boys, shrine women, even Abeni still wearing cowries on her wrists, up the ridge behind Cato until they reached the thorn fencing. He tore it down with his own hands. There, behind it, was the stonework channel, the locked gate, and the cut of water held back from the people below like mercy taxed by greed. Cato fitted the iron key into the mechanism. He paused once, not for drama, but because some acts divide a life into before and after. And then he turned it. The gate groaned. Mud shifted. Water burst through the lower stone mouth with a force so sudden that women cried out and children stumbled back laughing in disbelief, and the clean spring, trapped from months in the service of one man's ambition,
raced down the old natural course toward the village basins, where it had always belonged. No chant could compete with that sound. No elder could interpret it away. Even the most stubborn among them understood what they were hearing. Not only water, but evidence. Mbeku dropped his staff. Jabari said nothing. He simply stood there with the face of a man discovering that power often looks permanent only until proof gets wet. It was not the crowd that judged him first. It was his own son. Kato turned before all of Ndalu, removed the red bead sash that marked him heir to the chief's seat, and laid it at Jabari's feet. "If my blood was used to poison this village," he said, "then I refuse to inherit what was built from that poison. From this day, I stand with Ndalu, not above it. Let no one call me heir until the people themselves choose whether I deserve to remain among them."
That was the price Blood paid that morning, and it was heavy, because titles do not only offer privilege, they offer identity. And Cato stripped his own away in front of everyone. Chief Jabari reached toward him once, perhaps to command, perhaps to plead, but Cato stepped back. The son had crossed the line the father could never redraw. Abeni, who had spoken nothing through all of it, finally lifted her wrists and looked at the cowries still tied there. One of the older women began to untie them, weeping openly now, and the sight of that simple act broke something in the village. People who had watched in silence all morning started confessing the small cowardices by which injustice survives. The man who had heard workers on the ridge but said nothing. The woman who knew Nia feared for her life. The cousin who saw strange carts leaving the spring at night. The elder who suspected Mbeku's story but preferred safety to truth. That is how whole communities discover that evil is rarely guarded by monsters alone. Often it is guarded by tired, decent people who kept waiting for someone braver. Before sunset, the council stripped Mbeku of his authority and placed Chief Jabari under watch until neighboring elders could come and judge the theft formally. Because even disgraced power must be handled carefully when it has ruled too long. The sugar fields were seized for communal use. The eastern spring was reopened under public record, and Abeni, the girl they had dressed for death, was led not back to her uncle's dark room, but to the old record house where Mama Sade placed Nia's ledger into her hands and said, "Your mother guarded truth with ink. You guarded it by surviving long enough to be worth the risk." Abeni did not cry immediately. Some wounds are too old for quick tears. She only held the ledger against her chest and stood very still while clean water, real water, ran again through Ndalu below. Weeks later, when the children's rashes began to fade and the village pots filled without bitterness, people spoke of miracles, but the wiser ones corrected them. It was not a miracle, they said. Only truth allowed to move where greed had blocked it. Cato left the chief's compound and lived for a season in a plain hut near the restored spring, by his own choice, working with the laborers whose fathers had once bowed before his family, because repentance that costs nothing is only reputation in disguise. Abeni became keeper of accounts for the new council, and no document in Ndalu was ever again sealed by one person alone. 3 signatures were required from that day forward. One from an elder, one from a woman elected by the market guild, and one from the record keeper. Because villages that survive betrayal must redesign themselves around memory. As for Chief Jabari, he was not dragged through the streets. And perhaps that mercy hurt him more. Because to live after public disgrace is to wake each morning
inside the echo of the man you used to be. He lost the chair, the beads, the deference, and the illusion that his son would carry his name forward unchanged. In time, neighboring councils confirmed the theft, ordered restitution, and barred him from leadership for the rest of his life. He remained in Ndalu, but no child ran toward him, no farmer sought his blessing, and no song ever again placed honor beside his name. People remember dramatic punishments, but it is often quiet irrelevance that most destroys the proud. And Abeni? The girl who had once owned almost nothing but endurance, slowly built a different kind of life. She repaired her mother's abandoned room, planted lemongrass beside the doorway, reopened the record shelves, and taught village children on market-free afternoons how to count grain honestly, how to question a broken story, how to ask who benefits whenever the poor are blamed for the sins of the powerful. Sometimes, when the sun lowered and the spring glowed gold through the reeds, Kato would bring ledgers from the council and sit across from her in companionable silence, both of them knowing that some forms of love begin not in flirtation, but in witness, in being the one person who saw what the other survived. Whether the village later called them husband and wife mattered less than this. When fear came again to Ndalu in future seasons, as fear always does, it never again found an easy orphan to wear as its answer. Because the people had learned the oldest and hardest lesson of all, that when leaders ask for the innocent to pay for problems created by the powerful, it is not tradition speaking, and it is not the ancestors speaking, and it is certainly not God speaking. It is greed.
Press the subscribe button for many new untold African folktales, only on Untold African.